I took an introductory psychology course last semester, and I learned a lot about human social behavior. We even learned a bit of basic information about cults, which has been a lifelong interest for me, particularly the kinds that seem to form around conspiracy theories. I guess it would be an oversimplification to say I wasn't aware of any of this stuff before, though. Over the past few years, I've seen acquaintances, friends, and even family fall for misinformation that could pretty easily be debunked with a quick Google search. I'm only 18. If I can parse fact from fiction, why is this such a thing these days? Even with what I've learned in class, I'm amazed at how this continues to play out in real life. Outside of academia, in cold clinical laboratory environments. Time and time again, I'm stunned by how many rational, seemingly normal people accept blatant lies as fact. Not only do they accept it, but they spread it. Eventually, I started to ask myself, how does this happen? Is it that people are just so bored with their own lives that they are compelled to seek entertaining explanations for what is so clearly laid out in front of them? Then I asked myself, how far could it go? What kinds of things will people believe with little to no actual proof? The explanations in my textbook were not enough for me. I wanted to find out. Almost half a year ago, I started a social experiment. I joined a lesser-known discussion forum. I'm not going to name it here because I don't want anyone going over there after what happened, and pulled up the page to submit a post. I ran my fingers to the keys, eager to start my experiment. I ran into my first problem right there, in that first moment. I stared at the blank text box, zeroing in on the cursor as it blinked almost mockingly. It sounds stupid, but I wasn't creative enough to come up with an idea to base my conspiracy theory on. There were a few things I did know then, though. A few very important things, I think. I knew that people like a common villain to take a stand against. In a world full of gray area, people like black and white problems, a clear-cut evil. In addition, I knew that people like to be in on a secret, to feel like they're somehow aware of a problem that is hidden in plain sight. And people like problems that they don't really have to do anything about. A problem that they don't need to solve with anything other than raising awareness. I'll admit it. It took me several days of thinking before I figured out what to base my first post on. And when I finally landed on that idea, it didn't even come from my own creativity. I was watching a documentary, one about a rather infamous bloke. He was a murderer, both of man and animals. Cats, to be exact. The documentary seemed to focus mainly on the cats. All the awful things he did to those poor animals, and the great lengths to which complete strangers went to in order to stop him from hurting any more of them. There was very little information about his human victim, which stunned me. I've since read he was an incredibly compassionate and intelligent person. He was living abroad and lonely, just looking for friends when he met his terrible end. On a personal note, I think of him, his family, and his friends daily. I feel a great shame for all that I've ever done that could continue to perpetuate their grief, and an ever-increasing horror for what may still be to come. While I was struggling to understand the discrepancy in coverage, a thought hit me almost immediately. People fucking love cats. Even if you're not a cat person, you probably think anyone who hurts a cat should suffer tenfold themselves. It was exactly the black and white problem I was looking for. I was a little stoned, but I decided to give it a go right then. I popped open my laptop and started a post. Most of the world's stray cats vanished virtually overnight, yet the truth remains unknown by the masses. L tried to tell us the truth. We refused to listen. Police refused to investigate. Media refused to publish the truth. Massive scale cover-up to highest levels of government and society. The truth is hard to look at, but you'll never unsee it once you open your eyes. I fell asleep soon after publishing the post, but checked the thread first thing in the morning. I was expecting 1 or 2 responses at most, so I was absolutely floored by the amounts of replies present once I refreshed the page. 162 comments. Some of the users laughed me off as expected, were greatly outnumbered by those vehemently agreeing with me and pressing me for more information. Almost desperately. People wanted to know how they could help save the cats. Even more surprisingly, users worked together to decode portions of my message. They worked quickly until they accurately identified the subject of the documentary that I had seen just the other night. I had barely given any information, but they figured it out. Honestly, I was amazed. I was proud. It was a strange feeling. Still, people wanted more. I gave them what they wanted. Cats once recognized as gods. Now pussy means weak. This is purposeful. Innocent, helpless kittens rounded up to fulfill the sick and depraved needs of the world's mega-rich elites, to harness their inherent power. Look hard at the world around you. Ask yourself, where did the cats go? Snickering, I posted the comment. I figured that with the escalation of the absurdity in the information, and my pure audacity in inputting a cat pun, it would be all over then. Part of me wanted it to be over then, to finish as soon as it had started. But I'm ashamed to admit that a deeper, darker part of me wanted to ride this out for as long as possible. That part of me became increasingly impossible to ignore as the comments flooded in. TY for this, HD. About time people woke up to the harsh truth. Where did the cats go? HD, you should make your own board. We need more information. We need to know the truth so we can help you put an end to this. Save the cats! Down with the elites. Sick fucks. The third comment stuck out most to me. I followed their advice and created my own board. I titled it WDTCG, short for what seemed to be the first rallying cry associated with my Fox conspiracy theory. Users flooded into the board, joining at a rate that left my jaw on the floor. I was nearing 1,000 members by the end of that first day, all ears for whatever I would say next. I decided to wait before posting any new info. I needed time to think. I closed my laptop that night, feeling oddly powerful. I had more people hanging on my every word than I could have ever imagined before all of this. All at once, it hit me. The realization that I needed to be careful with what I said. Any wrong move could cost me what I'd managed to build in such a short period of time. The next couple of months went by smoothly, with my interaction and reader base growing steadily. Some days the number of followers would spike almost exponentially. They started calling themselves the Cat Crusaders, which I found oddly endearing. Oftentimes, they'd make connections that I hadn't even thought of beforehand. I'm embarrassed to admit that sometimes I even wondered if I accidentally stumbled upon the truth, if I knew more than I knew. If by some fantastical coincidence, my fabricated conspiracy theory was actually true. They combed through pop culture and media, picking out instances that could align with WTDCG, a user who I came to recognize as my most active follower, XXXXX2999, the one who had suggested I start my own board in the first place, posted a particularly jarring thread about that song, WAP. WAP is to downplay its horrific hidden meanings. It's clearly about drowning cats. The elites and their spineless lackeys in the media are rubbing the truth in our faces, inoculating us with it in our everyday lives, so that reality seems far-fetched. When will the people wake up? The Cat Crusaders quickly added anyone associated with the song to the list of the elites they suspected as part of cat torture rings to a running list. Suspicion quickly turned to undeniable fact in their minds, and the list quickly grew into the hundreds. In conversation, members termed these elites wolves, a known predator of cats. Some of the zanier members began to assert that the wolves were actual wolves, either humanoid werewolf-type creatures or wolves in human skin suits. A few even insisted that they could tell the difference, that their human appearance was almost believable, but not enough to trick them. I dropped new info posts fairly regularly, making sure to give members time between each to work out any hidden meanings. They continued to make more and more connections, uncovering any acronyms or other word puzzles I utilized. I didn't want to give everything away all at once, so that they could decode either on their own or more often as a team. Working together seemed fun for them. It was fun for me too. It was like a game that we were all playing together. Things went from funny games to something much worse overnight. When the lockdown started, I saw a massive increase in numbers. People were bored at home and grasping for some understanding in such increasingly incomprehensible circumstances. Members began downplaying current events, claiming that the media was distorting reality. They used snappy one-liners as a point-blank denial of real problems that fostered real injustices. I watched, sick to my stomach, as comments like, anti-mask, anti-vax, but pro-cats, and cat lives matter became normal and even celebrated. After all, if the wolves had to take such tremendous measures, if they had to pull so many strings to stage such extreme scenes, it only meant that they were on the right track, or that we were on the right track. Even more troubling still, some extreme viewpoints started popping up. It went from save the cats to death to all wolves in the blink of an eye. There were a lot of wolves on the list by that time, and these severe and violent sentiments both deeply sickened me and stoked a sudden fear of what I'd created, what the Crusaders might become or do. Those viewpoints only represented a small minority of users, so I figured the best thing to do was to abandon the experiment altogether, to stop adding fuel to the fire, as they say. I went dark for a month or so, ousting any lingering thoughts of WDTCG as soon as they came to mind. Considering how much time and thought I'd put into the experiment, forgetting about it was a struggle. I never honestly forgot about it, not even for a second. It overtook my thoughts entirely even when I was away from the forum. Forgetting only became more difficult as time went on, and I started noticing some troubling signs. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. I'd spend months practically forcing myself to adopt a hyper-paranoid mindset after all. But with each passing day, and with each additional reminder, it all became impossible to ignore. WDTCG was starting to go mainstream. I spotted posts on normie social media sites that seemed entirely innocent on first glance. Image posts decrying high rates of animal abuse started to pop up on my feeds. This felt normal enough. Of course, people are sympathetic to this cause, right up until the hashtags. My stomach must have finally given into that fear ulcer I'd been brewing for months when I read it. Hashtag WDTCG. Fuck. Ignorance was never bliss in this situation, but I knew then it wasn't really a viable solution either. With fearful shaking hands, I logged back into my account. Part of me expected that the rest of my followers would have gone dark with me, that the board would have withered and died without me to lead them, that they would have understood that if I suddenly stopped posting new information, that the information must not have ever been real in the first place. That part of me was optimistic, the part of me that engaged in wishful thinking. That part of me was also greatly overshadowed by a more realistic version of me. The part of me that knew what I'd done and what to expect when I logged back on. That part of me was right. In my absence, the board had absolutely exploded. Not only in the overall member count, but also in activity. The front page was cluttered with threads posted just in the last day or so. The top post had reached over 1,000 comments, and the rest were in the hundreds and counting. I skimmed the first thread, then the next one, and the one after that. I scrolled down, read more. If only to convince myself that what I was reading wasn't true, that all of this was fake, just a funny game for all of them, like it was for me. Fear twisted in my gut as I was forced to confront the truth. They all thought this was real. Isolated in a perfect echo chamber, members of my board had only further reinforced their outlandish beliefs. Any opinion that branched even slightly away from their dogma was quickly dogpiled. Any measure of doubt or questioning, regardless of the intention behind it, I believe these questions were raised by members who only wished to strengthen the claims of the larger group, were snuffed out in an instant. It was a metaphorical circle jerk in every possible way, and what was left after dissenting opinions were squashed was the worst version of the conspiracy theory, the most extremist and hateful version, the version that only represented a minority of users before I left. I scrolled through users' fervent calls for justice and retribution, really a thinly veiled euphemism for violence, for vengeance. I thought, or rather I hoped, that if I stopped feeding them information, then they would forget about WDTCG. I hoped that if I stopped acting as their leader, that they would cease to exist without my guidance. It was only then I faced a sickening reality, one in which they didn't even need me to anymore, at all. I knew I had to at least try to stop them, so I did the only thing I knew to do. I posted. Knowing I had to move quickly, I started a live chat thread. Comments quickly flooded in as users welcomed me back with open arms. They wanted to know what had happened to me. Had my mission been compromised? Had I been taken captive by the wolves? Did I have anything new to share with them? Because they said, they sure as hell had a lot to share with me. I was welcomed warmly, like a war hero returning back to his people. Right up until I finally did the right thing. The thing that anyone with respect for their fellow man would do. I told them the truth. I told them, none of this is real. I made it all up. I waited a few moments, slowed by agonizing fear, before I hit enter to send the message. The following seconds were even more terrifying as I watched the dots appear at the bottom of the chat. Then responses came in one after the other. I call bullshit. There's no way you could have made this shit up, dude. Anyone with eyes can see what's happening. You'll be executed with the other wolves then on Judgment Day. Haha, funny joke, HD. Again? Fuck. I started fact-checking my past info posts, meticulously disentangling their core beliefs that had resulted from misinformation I'd provided. I started small because I thought I'd get less pushback, but I was wrong again. When they refused to listen to reason even on the more superficial lies that I'd spread, I tackled the most fundamental underlying info, my first post. I explained that if they were indeed seeing fewer stray cats in their neighborhood, this was likely due to catch, spay, and release programs, or better animal shelters. Perhaps a combination of both. I tried to explain that it was even more likely that nothing had changed at all, but their perception of the outside world had been altered by reading my lies. They didn't like that one either. As a latch-ditch effort, I typed in the sentiment I tried to communicate from the start. perhaps fearing from the very beginning that everything that I was seeing would occur. This movement is about peace and love. It is about saving innocent animals, not violence and destruction. It didn't take long before the replies materialized. Each confirmed my deepest fears. No, it's about justice. You're just a fake and a sellout. Death to all wolves! It went on like this for minutes, each reply more hateful and horrific than the last. Finally, the barrage of extremism was broken by a single reply from a user I immediately recognized. When I read his words, I could not feel anything other than terror. User XXXXX2999. Hold on. Sorry. HD is watching. Communicating with me now. Yep, just as I suspected. Account compromised. Await further instructions. That motherfucker. Fury eclipsed fear in that moment, and I put my fingers to the keyboard, fervently typing a counter response. Right as I hit send, I received an error message. I refreshed the page only to find that my account had been logged out, and I couldn't get back in. Eventually, I managed to join the board again, but I could never get back into my old account. I don't post anymore. I just watch my own lies spread further, deeper. I've reported the board a number of times. It's even been deleted twice. It always comes back though, and they're picking up new ways to avoid the ban hammer. They removed the list of wolves. They learned to speak in coded language that sounds harmless but is anything but. I've tried to communicate with law enforcement, but there's really nothing they can do at this point. They're right. The Cat Crusaders haven't really done anything yet. But I fear what they will do in the future. And I'm starting to see even more troubling signs. It happened slowly at first, but it's only gotten worse. I've been searching for it now, so I may be biased, but the signs are clear. 1 or 2 animal shelters recently reported being flooded with anonymous phone calls that have taken away their time and resources to address animal welfare. The callers demanded that they concentrate their efforts on saving the cats from the elites. Then a few reports of higher instances of catnapping, even to the point of animal hoarding. And there's the ever-escalating fury on the board, the calls for the blood of wolves. Someone is posting from the account now. I don't know who it is, but I have my suspicions. They release info posts that fit with the new extremist conspiracy theory that became the majority view in my absence. The Cat Crusaders lap it up eagerly, use it to further fuel their hate. I was wrong about it from the beginning. I was wrong about them. They aren't stupid or gullible. They're incredibly clever and quick and most of all, dedicated. They're just dedicating themselves to a made-up issue because they were deliberately misled. It's all my fault. I've officially lost control of my experiment. And now I fear what I've created.